لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين ومن اتبع بإحسان إلى يوم الدين أما بعد. To proceed. In this lesson we want to continue our discussion of al-af'alu and their particular states. So in our previous lesson we spoke about the three different types and some indicators by which we recognize them. And this is the next point to note regarding al-af'alu in relation to the way they affect al-maf'ulu, the object, is this distinction between al-fi'lu al-muta'addi and al-fi'lu al-lazim. Al-muta'addi, it relates in English to being transitive, i.e. fi'lun, a verb that takes an object. Al-lazimu relates in English to being intransitive, meaning a verb that doesn't take an object. In English, those two terms, transitive and intransitive, do not make a great deal of sense literally, but in Arabic they do. And there is a reason for that. Therefore, al-muta'addi and al-lazimi or lazimu, lazimu. Al-muta'addi is the one that takes a maf'ulun. Al-lazimu is the one that does not. For example, a simple example is kataba al-waladu risalatan. Kataba al-waladu risalatan. Why is kataba considered to be al-fi'lu al-muta'addi? Because his action of writing, ay al-waladu, we say ta'adda, which is also a verb, ta'adda, which means to go beyond or to transgress. His action of writing ta'adda has transgressed or gone beyond al-waladu, the boy, to risalatan, a letter. So the action is past, it's moved to the object. If we take an example of al-fi'lu al-lazim, such as hazina al-waladu, which means he became sad. Who became sad? Al-waladu, the boy. The boy, hazina, became sad. That is an example of al-fi'lu al-lazim, the one which its action of sadness does not transgress or go beyond the doer and the waladu. That therefore is a distinction. Al-muta'addi takes an object, maf'ulun. Al-lazimu does not take an object. We only have fi'lun and fa'ilun. That therefore is a distinction by way of example between them. However, it's important to know that even in relation to al-fi'lu al-muta'addi, there are two types of them too. The one which, as they say, al-muta'addi bi nafsihi wal-muta'addi bi ghayrihi. Al-muta'addi bi nafsihi, meaning it is transitive by itself, so it takes a direct object, and it one which is bi ghayrihi, it requires the assistance of something else, such as a harfu jar. So to illustrate, for example, if we say araftu al-khabara. Araftu al-khabara. Araftu means I knew or I was aware. Al-khabara means the news or the information. So you can see Araftu al-khabara, which is a maf'ulun bihi, is it what we call al-maf'ulu as-sarihu, a direct object? The answer is yes, because there's no intermediary, or wasitatun as we say, an intermediary which we need in order to cause the effect of the action to fall upon the object. We don't have that there, do we? However, if we say نظرت إلى البحر. Here in this example, نظرت إلى البحر, which means I looked towards the sea, literally, that's what it means, but in English we would translate as I looked at the sea. نظرت إلى البحر. We can see here that in order for the meaning of the fi'lun, which is looking, in order for that to affect the maf'ulun bihi, we needed an intermediary of a harfu jarrin, which here is ila. See that? And there are numerous other instances that we could cite, but the point to note is we can identify them by looking to see if we require a harfu jarrin in order for the effect of the fi'lun to fall upon the maf'ulun bihi. Another example you could say is ذهبت به إلى المدرسة. ذهبت به إلى المدرسة, which means ذهبت, I went, به, with him, إلى المدرسة, to the school. In this instance, the he, the attached pronoun to the harfu jar, that could refer to any male person, like a boy or a man or a student. ذهبت به, I went, به, with him, إلى المدرسة. But the he here is a maf'ulun bihi. But in order for the dhihab, the going, to affect the he, we had to introduce harfu jarrin in order for the effect to fall upon the object. So it's not particularly complicated to understand this concept that al-muta'addi either بنفسه or بغيره. So we have two types of al-muta'addi. What we're going to say therefore is that is going to be بنفسه and بغيره such as with harfu jar. If I write that line in a more straight fashion, it will be more obvious, inshallah. So we have two types of al-muta'addi بنفسه and بغيره. Thereafter we have another distinction regarding al-muta'addi, because actually that's quite interesting, al-muta'addi. Why? Because al-muta'addi can, which we know is the one that affects a maf'ulun, there are actually three types. There's the muta'addi which affects maf'ulun bihi, i.e. a single one. There's a muta'addi that affects maf'ulaini, ithnaini, meaning two objects. And there is a muta'addi which affects thalathatu maf'il, three objects. So we're going to look at the second two because we've already discussed the first one. So we know therefore that al-muta'addi, it can be a single مفعول به. مفعول به. So that would be a single مفعول به, and we could mention by way of example قرأت كتابا. I read a book. So قرأت is a type of فعل. It's al-madi. Is it al-muta'addi or al-lazim? It's al-muta'addi, as is apparent. Does it affect a single maf'ulun, two maf'ulaini, or three mafa'il? The answer is a single one. قرأت كتابا. Now, there are certain types of af'alun that can affect two maf'ulun or maf'ulaini. So we can say, for example, we can have maf'ulaini. Actually, it will probably be more correct to write that maf'ulani, because it should be in the marfu'an state. Maf'ulani. That's better. Maf'ulani is two objects, right? In relation to when you have a fi'lun that affects two types. In relation to when you have a fi'lun that affects two objects, there can be two types of those two objects. This is where it becomes even more interesting. What we mean by two types of two objects is what the two objects are originally. In summary, and this will be made clear by way of example, either your two objects will be originally al-mubtada'u and al-khabar, or they will not be al-mubtada'u and al-khabar. We're going to explain that in a moment. So either they are going to be al-mubtada'u and al-khabar or not. So let's take the example where it's not. ليس بمبتدأ والخبر. So this is an example where it is not al-mubtada' al-khabar. So if we take, for example, a'ta, this verb a'ta, what does a'ta mean? It means he gave. We read it all the time in Al-Kawthar, where Allah Azza wa Jalla said, Inna a'taynaka al-kawthara. Inna a'taynaka al-kawthara. A'ta is the verb here that we're concerned with. A'ta. What does a'ta mean? He gave. A'tayna means we gave. A'taynaka means we gave to you. So the damirun here of al-kaf is maf'ulun bihi al-awwal, the first maf'ulun bihi. So this is the first maf'ulun. Al-Kawthara, as you note, is a mansubun, is also what Allah Azza wa Jalla gave to the Messenger sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Therefore this is the maf'ulun, which is a second. This is an awwal, this is a thani. So you can see a'ta therefore takes two maf'ul, or you can have two maf'ul attached to a'ta, he gave. Similarly, there are multiple other examples such as allama, which is a very common one. Allama, it means he taught. Allama, he taught, as in the ayah that we read in Surah Al-Baqarah, وَعَلَّمَ آدَمَ الْأَسْمَاءَ Here, note that Allama is he taught. Who is a doer? Allahu Azza wa Jalla. Adama, he taught Adama, so therefore Adama is al-maf'ulu bihi al-awwal. Al-asma'a, the things, the names, al-asma'a is mansubun, and that is the second type of, or the second maf'ulun bihi. Now note, we said that this example of two or maf'ulani, two maf'uls, laysa bi mubtada and khabar. They are not al-mubtada and al-khabar. They are not. How do we know this? Because if we extract, for example, here, Adama and al-asma'a out of this sentence, that would not be al-jumlatul ismiyya, would it? You couldn't say Adamu al-asma'u. It wouldn't make sense. We couldn't say enter, which is what the kaf refers to. Enter al-kawtharu. Is al-kawthar. It wouldn't make sense. So in the origin, these two objects, Adam and al-asma'a, enter and al-kawthar, are not considered to be al-mubtada'u and al-khabar. The other example that we could mention is al-basa. Al-basa. Al-basa means he clothed. He clothed. Such a, for example, al-basat, you could say, al-basat, al-basat, al-ummu. That of course will become al-basatil ummu, but al-basat al-ummu, al-binta, al-mi'tafa. Al-basat, she clothed. Who clothed? Al-ummu. Who did she clothe? Al-binta, therefore that is the maf'ulun bihi al-awwal. What did she clothe her in? Al-mi'tafa, which is a coat. Al-mi'tafa, so the meaning of it is the mother clothed the girl in, but the in isn't there, al-mi'tafa, a coat, or the coat. So here we have three examples of a fi'lun that takes maf'ulani, two objects whose origin is not al-mubtada and al-khabar, right? If that still doesn't make sense, it will do shortly, because the next type of verbs that we're going to mention, the objects are originally al-mubtada'u and al-khabar. But before we erase this, is this clear? So we started off, if we just have a quick recap, with the fact that all af'alu are either al-muta'addi or al-lazim, either ones that take an object and the ones that don't. The ones that do take an object, there are three types. Ones that take one object, such as qara'tu kitaban, akaltu lahman. And then the second type are those that take maf'ulani, two types or two objects, and we mentioned three examples, أعطى, علم and ألبس, and these three, their objects in each instance are not originally مبتدأ and الخبر. We hope, inshallah ta'ala, that is clear. Next type of fi'lun that affects maf'ulani, two objects, is the one where originally the two objects are mubtada, al-mubtada'u and al-khabar. So we're going to now speak about this category, which again is maf'ulani, but these are originally al-mubtada'u and al-khabaru. Right, what do we mean by that? Now, before we begin, these types of af'alun, they are given a special name. They are called af'alul qulub. So, in brackets we'll write af'alu al-qulubi, because that's another alpha construct. Af'alul qulub means verbs, literally al-qulub of the heart. And why are they called af'alul qulub, or verbs of the heart? Because they relate to the heart. Meaning al-idraku, perception, because perception is connected to the heart in the Sharia. So any type of verb that relates to al-idrak, perception, which is an internal emotion, they are referred to as af'alul qulub. So what type are we talking about? For example, if you say ra'aytu, ra'aytu, and it's important to note this, that it has two meanings, of course. Well, it has more than two meanings. But ra'aytu, from the verb ra'a, that can mean I see with my eyesight, and it can also mean I have al-idrak, I've perceived something with my heart. When we are talking about ra'aytu with the eye, then it's not considered to be from af'alul qulub, and it will not take maf'ulaini. So if you say, for example, ra'aytu ash-shajarata, I saw the tree, that ra'aytu is not ra'aytu of af'alul qulub, right? So it would not take maf'ulaini or maf'ulani in the marfu'un state. But the ra'aytu, which is one of perception, will do. For example, ra'aytu as-sidqa sabilan an-najah. An-najahi. Ra'aytu as-sidqa, which means I saw, but here it means I've understood or perceived, recognized that as-sidqa, the truth, being truthful, sabil, a path, and najah, of success. Ra'aytu as-sidqa sabil an-najah. Note that ra'aytu here, being from min af'al al-qulub, takes two objects. The first is as-sidqa, and the second is sabila. Sabila. The first is as-sidqa, the second is sabila. Now remember, when we said that statement that may have been slightly confusing, that the origin is al-mubtada and al-khabar. Well, here, if we removed ra'aytu, if we delete ra'aytu, and then we say as-sidqu sabilun najahi, it would mean the truth is a path of success. Of course, we would have to make that marfu'un and not marfu'un, but the point is this would be al-mubtada'u and this would be al-khabaru, and this is mudafun ilayhi. So that is why the second type is the one whose origin is al-mubtada'u and al-khabar. So if we put ra'aytu back, ra'aytu as-sidqa sabil an-najah. Similarly, from af'al al-qulub is alimtu ash-sharra. Or you could say alimtu al-kadhiba. Let's have it the opposite. Kadhiba. Al-kadhib is lies. Alimtu al-kadhiba sabila al-fashali. Fashali means loss, failure. Fashali. Alimtu al-kadhiba sabila al-fashali. Again, alimtu min af'al al-qulubi. Right? Therefore it takes two maf'ulani. The first is al-kadhiba, the second is sabila. And originally they are, of course, al-mubtada'u and al-khabaru. Which is why if we remove alimtu, it becomes al-kadhibu sabil al-fashali. Or al-kadhibu sabilul fashali, rather, because that would be marfu'un. And of course, when we've mentioned these examples, they're not the only examples. There are multiple other examples that we could mention. So for example, from this type is wajadtu. And similarly to wajadtu is al-faytu. Al-faytu means I found, and wajadtu means I found. But note again that you could mean by wajadtu I found, wajadtu al-qalama, I found the pen. In this instance, it wouldn't be from af'al al-qulub. Therefore, it would not take two objects. It's only because we're using wajadtu and al-faytu to refer to af'al al-qulub, a perception. So in Arabic, you can say wajadtu al-ilma خيرا من الجهل. وجدت العلم, I found the knowledge or knowledge, خيرا, better, من الجهل, than ignorance, which of course is true. وجدت العلم خيرا من الجهل. Again, note that wajadtu could be used to refer to something which is tangible. Mean wajadtu al-qalama, wajadtu al-miftaha, wajadtu al-kitaba. In this instance, they would not take two objects. Right. The other final point that we wanted to mention regarding af'al al-qulub is there is another type of af'al called af'al al-yaqeen. أفعال اليقين. يقيني. أفعال اليقين. What does أفعال اليقين mean? Well, we know that أفعال means verbs. Al-yaqeen means certainty. So whenever you have a fi'l min أفعال اليقين, then they will take two objects. Now we have already mentioned two of them, such as رأيت and علمت. These two are also considered to be أفعال اليقين, i.e. ones of certainty. So when I said رأيت الصدق سبيل النجاح, that I have understood that الصدق, the truth, is the path of success. Now that's being certain about that matter. Similarly, wajada and alqaytu are also considered af'alul yaqeen, in addition to daraytu, I knew, and ta'allamtu, I learnt, and various others. These also will take two maf'ulaini or maf'ulani in the marfu'an state. So it's something to be aware of. Right, we hope, inshallah ta'ala, that is clear. In our next lesson, we will discuss the other types of af'alun related to this, and then move on to the third category, that is the one where the fi'lun affects three or more mafa'il, as we would say, objects. We'll conclude on that point. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdika ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk.